Shalom Aleichem.
And Yoel, Alchonan, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We're on an exciting journey in Mitzvah Hashem to figure out the mitzvah of Shmiras HaMikdash, and specifically if it's relevant for us today. Is it a mitzvah upon me and you today to do the mitzvah of Shmiras HaMikdash? As we spoke about this last night, and we spoke about this Mincha Shabbos, there was a firestorm in Israel in the year 1870, Tofrei Lamed. Reb Hillel, Moshe, Yeshua Meshel, Reb Hillel, Yeshua, Moshe Meshel, Gelbstein printed a sefer called Mishkanos Yaakov. We said, how you talking? We have to do the mitzvah today, and he got practically involved in it. I sent out a long file with Modern Mekoimus for tonight. First of all, a forward to his sefer, a couple of copies from his sefer. His sefer is over 100 pages. I'm not sending you a sefer, just what we could barely scratch on the surface. And also the counter tshuva against it from the Avni and a couple of pages from the beginning of the sefer of the Minchas Eluzah. Minchas Eluzah wrote a counter sefer against this idea of making shemim for the Beis HaMikdash. So before we dive straight into it, I told you Shabbos Shalashud is a fantastic story. So if you have the Modern Mekoimus, so you don't have to trust me, and you can read it on your own. The first 2 pages, sorry, didn't come out so clear, but from the 3rd page on, you have the foreword that his grandchildren printed in the sefer. And again, the point of the sefer is that today there's a mitzvah to guard the Beis HaMikdash. And he goes through many details. I just gave you a copy of the first page. 22 questions, like you need to have dafka 3 kohanim. Could you have 6 kohanim? 21 levim. Could you have more? Could you have less? Could they stand outside? Because inside is a problem. He goes through, and then he goes through the sugya quite well. It's a geshmaka sefer to go through on the sugya. As I told you, I was surprised when I saw that he says that he has a haskama from the Tzemach Tzedek. Now, how could there be a haskama from the Tzemach Tzedek when this is printed? The sefer is printed in Tofresh. So many years after the Tzemach Tzedek passed away, Tofresh Chavav. So look at the haskama. It's fascinating. Haskamas Isha Lakim Butzina Kadisha Agona Miti Saratoira Beniglo Vanista Rash Kol Bnei Agoylo Admoir the Tzemach Tzedek Menachem Mendel Harebi Hagodol Mechassidei Chabad. It's a funny Harebi Hagodol Mechassidei. Where's Piamenta here? Harebi Hagodol Shel Chassidei Chabad. Okay, look at the Hine. He says Bishnas Tofresh Mem Dalet. Boilai Ish Echad Zakim Ibnei Levi. The Sipper Lifitumika Iker Asher Bo Lepo Hu Mishum Kivishnas Tofresh Tezayin Oy Balabavich. It's Lamoide Admor the Tzemach Tzedek. Leizer Sibuk Shnason like Sav Shmoy B'Shem Imel Espal Lov Shol Imenu Imu Ibnei Levi Amarhein. This person was in Lubavitch and he gave a kvittel to Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek said, "Are you a Levi?" So he said, yeah. So he said, Tzemach Tzedek said, but you didn't mention it. Amar Admor, yesh li eze inyan she'eni yochel limsa b'yad shum adam etam hakomas, vel ela b'yotcha b'shvil eze mitzvah gedoyle shasisa. You have a big schus, I'm going to give you a shlichus. Hizar sh'lotamer ela l'isha em elecha v'lo l'zolosav. Amar le'beruach HaKodesh. Years man shativ Yerushalayim la'erev shnas Tofresh Mem Aleph Mem Beis Mem Gimel Medalet Kshehiske Shem Tofresh Mem Aleph Genuach Gonach Eze Pa'amim brackets Kenira Shadov Baruch HaKodesh HaTzoros She'over B'Shonim Anal end brackets. Read the rest for on your own. But the Chapis Shem Ish Shmoi, whatever his name, Moshe or Hillel Moshe Barav Tzaddik Mir Pliny. Ubesnas Tofresh Mem Dalet Takiro Sehete V'Tomer Like Kol Mashav Shemata Mepi. Hoya Etzli Eze Shana Koiden Lazeh. He writes, I was there in the year Tofresh Yud Gimel. ולא יהיה לו עוז חסים הזוקים, וזה יהיה לו סימן מובי, כי אני מדבר אליך. So he writes in brackets, ועוז עדיין לא יעולו דייתי, ולא ילדה סנה על ליסה לפוי. At that time, when the Tzemach Tzedek said it, not I thought how did Tzemach Tzedek know that I'm going to end up moving to Yerushalayim? And this is so many years later. And more like who yechad shroze Torah, asher al zenem and achmod mipaz mipaz rov, val zenem emetz me'eretz titzmach. Shishu bnei Yisrael b'koyle oz yitzmach Yeshua. Isn't that fascinating? And then skip the Bays and the Gimel, and look at the Dalet. And more like b'yom hey tevis yavin kavanos. Terem shenosem imenu bikesh mimenu levorche v'niach yodav haroishe v'ama mizma kuf yud aleph oida Hashem gedoy l'mayis Hashem gedulim kol ha-mizmar v'arama ani mevarecha shetzliach b'shlichusi laved avodas lavim v'beis hamikdash. I'm giving you the bracha that you should serve the avodah in the beis hamikdash. V'oid hereche ish hanal b'shmoi zatzal v'yikoshe lahamin kol kach v'kofatz v'nishba l'fnei haroin hakodesh be'erev yom kippur shemer emes v'zbenanti b'divrei moiri zatzal shenigla loi beruch hakodesh kani osel l'chadash inyam avodas halavim v'efshe loi hoya loi oz rishus legalis. Okay, I'll let the rest is as fantastic as this. I'll let you read. At the end is the signature of 10 people in Yerushalayim that they said they heard Eidus from this person about the story. At the end, he says the person, after he came to Yerushalayim, he couldn't find him. The Tzemach Tzedek came to him in his dream 3 times and told him, you're not doing my shlichus, so on. Enough. Anyway, you could look in the Ma'anim HaKamis yourself. It's a fantastic, fantastic story. And I'm not saying that it's a skama from the Tzemach Tzedek. Maybe the Tzemach Tzedek thought it came time in the future that the time is going to come to make a big deal out of it. But Me'echi Teisi, that it's a skama, that Tzemach Tzedek really agreed that everything he said, that Ram Shachir for me and you to go out to Yerushalayim and make sure that there's guards around the Harabayis. But anyway, it's a fantastic story that the Tzemach Tzedek called over a person that came to him, and he said that you forgot to write your Alevi, and I'm giving you a shlichus about Avodas Halavim, that as a shaykhus Avodas Halavim, and then 20 years later you're going to be in Yerushalayim, you're going to meet a person's name Moshe Meshel and tell him that he's going to be Mechad or something on Hey Tevis. And I agreed that it's Emes Me'eretz Titzmach, that it's an Achmad Mizov, that it's and he really looked in his notes and he saw that Itake was Machadash Sinyan on Hey Tevis. So he said, I have a skam from Tzemach Tzedek for my project. Anyway, many of the other Taskamas are quite fascinating as well. You could read also as I sent in the source sheets, the history of his life, which is also very interesting. Anyway. So now let's get into the actual
coming back to 770.
Huh?
Maybe the Tzemach Tzedek mean the book going to come back to 770. Hey Davis.
Yom Segula Hey Tevis, unbelievable. I don't know. You could make what you would like out of this. You can make what you would like out of this. I'm telling you, the story is so fantastic. I can't hold myself back. When I was reading this last week, I couldn't wait to share it Shabbos. I can't believe that the ink would hold such, you know what I mean? The paper will hold the ink that tells such a fantastic story. Unbelievable. Like I said, this is a sefer that, you can't buy it. Even if you go into Bigelize and you order it. And I remember the good old days. If I needed a sefer, I'd go to Bigelize and maybe a couple of months later, I get a call. He has the sefer, yeah? The sefer, you're going to wait a few years. You're going to go to a library, find it. Amachaya, you got this little box, and you can get all a sefer, all fantastic stories. Without this, my little friend over here, I wouldn't know the story. Okay, well, let's get to the sugya. Fantastic story, and it's equally a fantastic sugya. Unbelievable geschmack in sugya. So let me start here. Let me start with the tshuva of the Avnei Neiser. The Avnei Neiser is a very concise. He was brilliant as a Goen Otzim, as also Chassidische Rebbe. And this Moshe Meshel, Reb Hillel Moshe Meshel sent him his thoughts, and he asked him then he wrote a tshuva, basically against it, against the idea of putting out guards around the Har HaBayis and around to do the mitzvah for Shmiras HaMikdash. So look in the source sheets that I sent. It's one of the first things after the fantastic story I just told you and so on. There is the tshuva of the Avnei Neiser. It's only 2 pages. Siman Tov Mem Tes. It's in Yeridea. Shalom v'chol tov v'lekavod Rabbanei Achoref Hachosid Reb Hillel Moshe Meshel Mir BeYalostok Yoshev Yerushalayim Tibonu v'Tekoyde b'Meher b'Menu Ami. Okay. Hine al dvar al dibras malos toirosa im chayve b'zman hazel hoishev shem l'mikdash. About your question, if there is an obligation today to put up guards around the Beis HaMikdash. Hine hashivenu kifikoyse sichli. Omvom loy la'alocha v'loy la'maisi, ki loy bihu la'achriya b'dover nagei l'klal Yisrael. He said the Sochet Shavah, and you think about the Sochet Shavah, one of the biggest poskim in his day. He said, who am I? Such a thing that's negated to Klal Yisrael, who am I to say? I'm just writing to you as a masamat and sharing my thoughts with you. It's just like Moed Mikdash, there is, and this I mentioned on Shabbos by Shalashodis, that just by Moed Mikdash there is a chiyuv that we say, and that's the halacha even b'zman hazeh, and not only for the Beis HaMikdash HaGadol, but also for Mikdash Miyat. So just like by Moed Mikdash, the Beferish Apostle to say that it's b'zman hazeh, also covered Mikdash, is covered and Moed, so they're not so different. Yid and Ava. So just like by Moed Mikdash, as a Beferish Apostle to say applies also b'zman hazeh, so also by covered Mikdash it applies also b'zman hazeh. Again, just like Moed Mikdash applies today, also covered Mikdash applies today. So he says, "This doesn't He says, who are me and you to make a kal v'chomer? The Chachmei Shas make kal v'chomer. We don't make our own kal v'chomers. Who are we to say? Especially according to the opinion that the Temple Mount is not, the Kedusha is not there. But we paskin anyway, the Kedusha is there forever, like the Rambam paskins. Like the Rambam. Maybe you're right that the mitzvah is still there. So as I mentioned Shabbos, the Minkat Sheruv went even further. He said, from the fact that we need a pasuk to say that Moed Mikdash applies even today, so it sounds like only Moed Mikdash applies today, but covered Mikdash does not apply today. But I don't know, little did the Minkat Sheruv perhaps realize, but in mitzvahs Saseh Yud Gimel in the Smag, he counts these two, covered and Moed Mikdash, as one mitzvah. So obviously you can learn them from each other. And even if you count them really as two separate mitzvahs, like the Rambam, Moed Mikdash and covered Mikdash, but like the Rambam says, like in the beginning of the 7th Perek in Hilchos Besabchira, Lo mima Mikdash atayore, elo mimisha tziva al meirah. The Moed is not from the building, from the bricks and the mortar. It's not from the pieces of a rock, or not from the pieces of marble. It's from the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Moed Mikdash and covered Mikdash are both from the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's not so far away one from each other. Why would you say that you can't learn one from the other? Again, especially according to the Smag, that they're both part of one mitzvah saseh. So I'm going to go through piece by piece and try to defend the Moshe Meshel here. Then the next Ois Gimel is a little bit of a pilpul. Just look at the last line. He says in Sefer Achinuch he writes the mitzvah zuna hegis b'zman habayis. Okay, so then you can't argue with that. The Chinuch holds that this mitzvah is only the time of the Beis Hamikdash. You can't argue with that. Chinuch is a rishon. He's entitled to his opinion. Not Dalet. Hine b'pshitus yesh b'pshitus yesh loimer yesh lahavim b'tame. The after ein shmiras mepnei ganovim, the ein sham ganovim k'mashkos avaramo, oy she'ein aniyas v'mak mashirus, hainu she'ein tachlis ha'machum shel hashmira aburze, ha'makom ha'kemtzor ha'shiyah she'em shimur alav, v'hashem b'vadei lishmer ha'kelim. He says, the Rambam says that the reason why we guard is not because there is ganovim, there is because of the covet. And the Mefarish in the beginning of Maseches Talmud says that why do we need guards? What's going to happen? Someone's going to steal? So they'll steal. We're wealthy. We've got the reservoir of money, the Beis Hamikdash. We have plenty. We can afford to buy new ones. So we'll buy new ones. What do you care if will be stolen, the old ones? So the answer is that we have enough money to buy new ones, but we're not even scared that people will steal. But it's not Bakovadik that this is a place that you know every crook can come in and take it. It's not Bakovadik. So therefore they have Shemrim. Okay, instead of Shmira. The whole idea is that you're going to guard the Kalim, they shouldn't steal. But Bizman Hazeh, there's nothing to steal. So it's not shaykh to say this mitzvah Bizman Hazeh. If the reason is they shouldn't steal the Kalim, and that is the covet, what are they going to steal today? And the truth is, I'm just a silly comment, but unfortunately true, that today that Israel made this tragic, silly decision to give the Temple Mount to the Waqf to be a custodian over the Temple Mount. They're constantly digging and destroying and ruining and building. They're building new mosques and destroying. There's a whole project outside Yerushalayim because they have trucks and trucks of soil that they've sent out because they built and they built and they built, and they're sifting through and they're finding unsolved treasures from the days of the Beis Hamikdash. I mean, the time has come for the Israeli government to say, yes, there is, stop. It's not a hefker place. It's not a place because every time they dig, they're destroying who knows how much. It's a very delicate thing. There was a churban. It's a lot of things that were left the way they are. They're just covered with soil, and they're just digging and they're building and they're digging and they're building and they're digging. They have no permission to build nothing. If you add a little screw to your porch in Yerushalayim, you get a ticket from the building department. The Waqf, they're maiming and destroying. Okay, but anyway, in the days of the Avnei, he wasn't familiar with maybe there is something to steal today. And the truth is, whatever, who says that those have the din of Kalim and the Beis Hamikdash? So if the thing is to guard the Kalim and the Beis Hamikdash, there's no Kalim to guard today. Ulam yesh lefarish hashmira. You could say that the pshat of the shmira is shelo yavisham misha asur lavi. The idea of the shmira is that someone that's also shouldn't enter. Well, and according to the opinion that the kedusha stays forever, like the Rambam says in the Paskan La'alocha. Av bizman hazeh nichnas l'toich chayiv to go and orel tamei goy shelo yavizol ha'echel. According to this opinion that kitchali asalavi, which is what we paskin. So if a person which is a Yisrael goes to the place of the hechel, it's chayiv kodesh. Chayiv kodesh. And a Tomei Mace is not allowed to go into the whole Azara. Tomei Sheyotze al Gufa is not allowed to go in the whole Harabayas. Spoke about this on Sunday morning, right? So therefore they have to guard. The guarding is to make sure that the mikdash doesn't become tummy. I don't know why he has to come up with this idea that it's for the mikdash, that the mikdash shouldn't become tummy. But I think I understand why. He says, Shuv, have a cover the mikdash. This is the cover the mikdash. And this is shaykh in Zman hazeh. Given the minadin also lichnas av zman hazeh, afilim lo yuchel shma neged hagoyim. Kol makom shaykh shima neged Yisrael. Sheragoyim makabel tumah. He said, even if you can pay off the Sultan and get permission, we're talking about the time when the Turks were ruling over Islam for about 400 years, right? So until World War I. So they say even when the Moshe Meshel had this idea that he would get the Sultan to give permission that there should be guards there. So he says, if you can get the Sultan to give permission that even the Goyim are not allowed to go on the Temple Mount, obviously that never would happen. The Sultan would never agree for such a thing. Upon him not. He would have a rebellion of Muslims against him. But even if you could have guards that are not allowed the Yidden to go there, Echet gut, you did the mitzvah. So let's pause for a moment. First, I want to show you something. The Avnei holds that the idea of the guards is covered. The Rambam says that. But what is the covet? He has an interesting synthesis. He's saying, what is the covet? Is the covet that the Ganovim won't go in and steal? Or that a Zod or a Tameh or an Auto won't go in? It's not Hefker Petrishke that anyone could go in, because that would be Metame the Mikdash. Why would it be Metame? Why is it important to say Metame the Mikdash? Maybe it's for their benefit, that they shouldn't die when they're going in. But that's the Rambam says, the cover the Mikdash. So that's the way in his mind he was mishal of the two things. The Rambam says it's cover the Mikdash. And the truth is, the Psukim, as we'll talk about this in a minute, says that the Yidden complain that Kol HaKorev Mikdash Hashem is dies. Him Tamnu Ligvoya. Kol HaKorev Mishkan Hashem Yomus. Him Tamnu Ligvoya. So David said this would be the mitzvah that they should. So how do you put it together? So the way he puts it together is that we're not concerned if they're going to die. We're concerned that the mikdash shouldn't get defiled. That still doesn't sit well with the psukim. Like it's not what it sounds like. The Jews are complaining, like Rashi says. David said they're going to guard so the Eden won't accidentally fall in there. That's not what but he's having a problem. He's trying to put together what's the pshat and the posuk and what the Rambam is saying. The Rambam says from the Sifrei also that the Shemirat of the Beis Hamikdash is you can't compare a palace with guards to a palace without guards. So therefore, they need to have guards. Cover the mikdash is to have guards. But the pasuk says a different reason that the Zohar shouldn't go in. So it's the covet. He answers the covet. The mikdash is that the Zohar. We're not concerned that the Zohar is going to die. We're concerned that this defiles the base of mikdash. The Zohar going in defiles the base of mikdash. Atome goes in. But then that's not what it's talking about in the Psukim. And besides the Psukim, the Eibush is telling the Yidden for the protection of the Yidden. So I don't see that he's answering the Kasha, how you put together the Rambam and the Psukim. To me, it's a non-answer answer. But okay, well, I'll get to my answer in a moment. Just to point out a very important thing, which the Rebbe also points out in the Sikha, in the footnote, in that Sikha we learned yesterday, footnote 21. That we see that the Avnei Nezer was Metzarev the two reasons. He was Metzarev covet and something else, in two ways. Covet, that Ganovim can't just go in and take whatever they want, or the covet is that a Tomei can't just go in and defile the Beis HaMikdash. And what's the nafkamina, says the Avnei Nezer? The nafkamina is the Sheikh Mazman Hazeh. If the covet is, it shouldn't come in and steal. So that's not shaykh b'zman hazeh. If it shouldn't defile, that is shaykh b'zman hazeh. But I don't understand who asked Aבני to make a shiluv over here. Who asked Aבני to make a shiluv over here? But the emphasis is that we see that the Moed Nevuchim made a shiluv. The Moed Nevuchim, and I sent this out. This is the last copy I sent out. The Moed Nevuchim has a fascinating chapter about the Beis HaMikdash. It's in Chela Gimel Perek Mem Hey, and he goes through everything about the Beis HaMikdash. And as the rest of the Moed Nevuchim, he rationalizes everything. For example, if you're looking at the Moed Nevuchim, this copy I sent out, he says, look at the second column where I underlined that because the Beis HaMikdash, there was a lot of animals that were slaughtered every day, so it must have stunk. It could smell like an abattoir. So therefore, the Eibusha said to bring toitus twice a day. When you bring toitus twice a day, it'll smell very good. And as Chazal say that the smell went all the way till Yericho, and through having a good smell, that's also Makayim Yiras HaMikdash, because if it had a bad smell, it would be the opposite. It would be a feeling which is a repugnant feeling, the opposite of Roimemus to the Beis HaMikdash. But through having a good fragrance, it took away the bad smell of the abattoir. Plus, it gave a chshivus to the place. Roimemus smells holy, smells delicious. Any person, I just want to pause for a moment. Sam, it always amuses me that Rabbi Seinu Nisienu learned the Rambam in the Moed Nevuchim as a very serious sefer, all the time quoted in the Chassidus. So, l'choyer is advar pe'alav. I was once a choshev Talmud Chacham in Yeshiva University. He tells me, or Nevuchim, it's a Kirov pamphlet. When you ask a kasha from the Moed Nevuchim, you ask a kasha from the Moed Nevuchim, it's a Kirov pamphlet. Lubavitch like, whoa, what? A Kirov pamphlet? Moshe ben Maimon Aspardi? He wasn't writing, period. His name was not Rabbi Manis Friedman or Rabbi Tatz. They were these two fellows are very choshev yid. The Rambam was not a Pesach Kron. Again, a very choshev yid. The Rambam wasn't writing, Kirov pamphlets, even though he did write it as a Kirov to help the Nevuchim. But we see the Beseinu Nisienu took very seriously what the Rambam writes in the Moed Nevuchim. I think, when you see Judaism in a very wide spectrum, so take the avodah Chabad, this Chochmah bin Adas, Das Alokei Avicha v'Evdeu ve'Elev Shalom Alpi Toras HaNister, Alpi Toras HaChasidus. But
Rabbi,
it leaves room to understand 1 second on every level. There's Pshat, there's Remez, there's Drush and the Soid. And like that Izal said, that in Pshat itself, there is Shivim Ponim La Torah. So Chas v'Shalom, we don't want to be from the Shivim Ocher La Torah, like the Chassid once said, that there's also Shivim Ocher La Torah, we don't want to be there, but the Shivim Ponim. The Rambam rationalized Torah. So I want to give you my thought about this. Say, it was once there was a woman that wanted to go through Gerus. It was in Coop City. So I asked my wife to start teaching her a little bit about mitzvahs, kalas, chamuras. So after a few weeks, my wife meets a woman in the elevator of the building. It was a shiksa, but she was friendly with my wife. And she says that Ploinus Bas Ploinus, this other shiksa, is telling her all kinds of weird things, how Jewish men and their wives, 2 weeks in the month they're on, and 2 weeks of all kinds of mamachlatzonis, all the shiksas in the playground talking about it today. She's sitting and telling everyone, needless to say, that this woman was not Megayed at the end. My wife realized she was wasting her time with this woman. Obviously, she was not Megayed at the end. Okay. So, if you meet someone and they ask you, what's this thing? Why is Eibishter coming into my bedroom 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, go to mikveh? a strange thing is a little kesem. You bring Ashmat to the husbands and bring it to the rabbis. This is so weird, right? So you meet someone, ask you such a shayla. What are you going to say? What are you going to say? What are you going to say? You're going to tell them what's the satisfaction rate that people have in intimacy. And what's the rate of divorce today in the United States? You know, how many marriages last? The Ribono Shel Olam, who's the maker of a human being, is also made the manual of how to use this machine. He made a machine and he made a manual, and he told you how to get the optimal out of this manual. And he told you, if you want to have intimacy that's hot, intimacy that's very strong and very close and very good and very satisfying, so 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Abstinence makes the heart fond. Person says, wow, brilliant. Maybe I'll try it. Yeah? Now, let me ask you for a moment. Did you just lie to this person? Okay, well, was that the reason? The Eibishter said, is that really the reason? Do you know that that's the reason? But on the other hand, it's not a lie, what you said. Could you say this is not the reason? If we see that the Eibishter says, and you see how it enhances the marriage by frum people, could you say that this is not the reason? That is the reason. Is this the ultimate reason? No, it's not the ultimate reason. But is it true that it enhances a marriage? Yes. Is it one of the Shivim Ponim in Pshat? Yes, it's one of the Shivim Ponim. So when you're starting with a Novuch, with someone who's perplexed and doesn't understand why the mitzvahs of the Torah, kind of strange thing. The husband's bringing a little shmata with a spot, and the rabbis are looking at the Sachaishas Begodim. Strange thing. And all of a sudden you give them a different perspective of how this enhances the intimacy of a marriage. Ooh. The Novuch starts to understand that the beauty that's a mitzvah. Is this the ultimate? Lav dafka. But is it true? Yes, it's true. It's one of the Shivim Ponim in Pshat in this mitzvah. The Rambam, that it's not like, we find sometimes Chazals, they didn't want to tell the tzedukah the real reason, so they told them that they threw them off. The Rambam, Chas v'shalom, he's not talking to tzedukah here, he's not throwing them off. It's not just something because the Rambam said that Chas v'shalom hepech emes. Moshe emes, v'toros emes. Moshe ben Maimon aspardi emes, v'toros emes. Everything Moshe, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon aspardi says is emes, Chas v'shalom. He rationalizes it for the Nevuchim to show them the beauty of Torah mitzvahs, of Pshat, and perhaps one of the lower levels of the 70 levels of Pshat. But is it true? 100% true. So, you wanted to ask something. Sorry, I didn't. I just wanted to finish the Nakuda.
Yeah, you were talking about the Rambam that in Kiruv, he wrote the Igeret Rambam. You know what happened?
Not Ramban. I'm talking about the Rambam. He wrote the Igeret Taimon. He wrote many other things that
Igeret Taimon, this is what I'm saying, yeah.
Right.
Was a big problem in Taimon, and he told, I think, his son to write the letter, and he helped them a lot.
Right, exactly.
Until today, they have this Igeret Rambam, and people read it, and they get encouraged to do good things.
Right, exactly.
And then they ask according to the Rambam. Everything they
saying Kaddish, B'chayechen, B'meichen, B'chaye, the Rabbon, Marona, V'Rabbon, Moshe, B'Maimon, Asfardi.
Really? I never know that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They're not the first one. They were the first ones to invent Yechi. Okay. Sorry, we digressed. So the Rambam writes, "Bechlal advarim hamavim lehidur hamikdash v'roim hamusay, kedei sheyeh lanu yira mimenu." One of the things that bring glory to the mikdash and roim hamus, that we should have yira, shalei konis lav shikra v'leitam v'leimenumel, kolaymar karua roish karua begadim shekol oivedi kaddish yad v'raglav. So is the Rambam is putting together the Koved HaMikdash with the fact that you can't have a shikr and menuvel just walk in. because there's guards that are standing there. That's what the Rambam writes. Avamasha b'shmira v'bikoy desav v'amikdash tamid has a roimemus loy v'chaved v'gam kidei shelo yisparet tzachsolam atmei meila v'loy b'matzah shel nivu u'mechlal advarim ha'meviim lehidra amikdash v'rememusa kidei shelo niriyeh memenu shelo yikonos lo v'shikar v'loy tamid v'lo menuvu. So the Rambam himself synthesizes in the Moreh Nevuchim the two, the kavod hamikdash and the fact that that a shikar tamim menuvu can't just enter because the guard is there. So we do see that the Moreh Nevuchim, it's just that it's a little different. The Aben says they shouldn't defile the Beis Hamikdash. The Rambam just said that they shouldn't. It's like nish kovedik that stam shikar could go in. Okay. So emes that we see, but the truth is the Moreh Nevuchim is not necessarily halacha. Even though the Moreh Nevuchim is true, Moreh Nevuchim cannot be halacha. For example, the Rambam in the Sefer Yad says that the Shmira is only by night, not by day. Now, like we mentioned, the Sikha, that by night the gates are locked, right? The Rambam said it must be for COVID. It couldn't be that the reason is that it must be that it couldn't be that the Shelo Yekonis Zor. Why? Because by night the gates are locked. The Rambam holds the Shmira is only by night. By night the gates are locked. So in the Moreh Nevuchim, when he says that the Shmira is when Menuvel shouldn't go in, and by night the gates are locked. So why do we have a Shmira? Obviously in the Moreh Nevuchim he was holding that the Shmira is 24/7. Why? Because that's really the mitzvah. The mitzvah is 24/7. In Sefer Hayad, which he learned on a different level, there was a pshat. He wanted to say rationalize. He wanted to rationalize. So to rationalize, the covenant is that Snam, a manuval b'shikah can't just walk in. So that's obviously 24/7. But al pi halacha, like we said yesterday, what's the neshama of the whole Shmira is shelo yasichu daita mimenu. And by day, the avodah itself makes it shelo yasichu daita mimenu. So therefore, the Shmira is only balayla, balay bayoim. And has nothing to do, Kedei Shelo Yekones, Zor, V'chein, Shelo Yekones, Tommy. La Halacha, the Rambam holds, has only to do with one thing, Kovid. Has nothing to do, not to steal, not to defile, that Tommy. It's Kovid Greda. It's Kovid Greda. It's Kovid. And L'choyre, if the word is Kovid, that's for sure Shaykh B'zman Hazeh. Loi B'bah, Mikdash Ata Yore, Elam Misha Tzival Yerosei. What's the difference? I mean, you could argue, you could say that the covet is only when the Beis Hamikdash is built. So it's nikir that you say you're guarding the mountain because of the Beis Hamikdash. Zman is that you're guarding the mountain. What are you guarding it for? You can argue, but pashtus. What do you mean? Why are you guarding? Because that's the Malkam Ashchina. That's the Malkam Ashchina. So I'm saying, according to the Rambam in the Yad HaChazaka, he says, "Ein adom paltein sheyesh alav shemen paltein she'en alav shemen." It's not a synthesis of a tam. That the covet is that a ganav doesn't enter. The covet is that a tamid doesn't enter. No, the covet is it's a paltein sheyesh alav shemen. That's the covet, and that is shaykh to say also b'zman hazeh. That is shaykh to say also b'zman hazeh. That is absolutely shaykh to say also b'zman hazeh.
Can I just ask you?
Yeah.
In Israel today, you've got IDF guards at the entrance. In other words, from the hotel. You're seeing. Aren't they guards? Can't they?
We spoke about that Shabbos. We spoke about this.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, we spoke about this. Yeah. It's a good question. I just because I want to, the time is ticking. So I don't want to go back to that Nakuda. So I just, again, to summarize. We said that the guarding the Beis Hamikdash for covet, and the Avnei Nezer learns the covet for what? So he says, is it covet that the Ganovim shouldn't go in to steal Kalim, or is it covet that they shouldn't go in and defile the place? Which is similar to what the Moreh Nevuchim is, that the Ganovim shouldn't go in and not defile, but it's not because the Ganovim could just go in. I'm sorry, Tomei, that the Tomei v'Orel v'Zor could go in. And it says, the Avnei Nezer, what's the nafkamina? If it's a Ganovim shouldn't steal, there's nothing to steal today. So that mitzvah is not sheikh's. If it's Machdei, it shouldn't defile the Mokim. So it's Shaykh also Bizman Hazeh. Even though the Moreh Nevuchim says that way, but as I said, the Moreh Nevuchim is not a halacha sefer and is explaining something which is not really lefi halacha, because according to the Moreh Nevuchim, B'chdei Tomei shouldn't go in and Azor shouldn't go in. So what do you mean? So Pi halacha, the Shmira was only Balayla, and Balayla the gates were locked. So anyway, the Tomei can't go in. Obviously, in the Moreh Nevuchim was not lefi halacha. But Lefi Halacha, it's not that way. Lefi Halacha, it's called Gereida. Like the Rambam says in the beginning of Perek Ches, Nilchas, where that's the whole Perek that talks about the mitzvah Shmiras HaMikdash. The first Halacha is Ein Adayim Paltedim, Sheyesh Shayim Lev Shayim, and Lepatel Shayim Lev Shayim. It has to be a palace that has guards, and that's Shaykh in Mazman Hazeh. Shaila remains is, where did the Rambam get that? The Sifrei says it. But where did the Sifrei get? I don't understand. It's not, if you look in the Chumash, and I sent out copies, in the end of the source sheets, the last few is copies in the Chumash and Bamidbar. It says in Koirach, there's after the story with Koirach and 250 men, and after the story of the Koirach of the Yidden that complained, and 14,700 passed away in that Magefa until the Adam saved them with the Ktoidus. And then after the story with the Shkedim. This is crazy, they said. Rashi says, so, you know, remember when the Rebbe used to go through and there was a shvil, right? It was packed, there was some chastoida, and you would stand in the front and you fell into the shvil. It happens, right? So they said every person could go to the Chatzar Oil Moed, but in the Chotzer you're allowed to be. But in the Oil Moed, if Eid goes into the Oil Moed, and Ladoidus, if Eid goes into the Heichel, he's Chayiv Misas, Kodesh. So maybe there'll be a lot of Eden that'll be pushy, and he'll get, by Tkiyas in 770 or some Chastoida, and he'll get pushed into the Shvil, he'll get pushed, and then he's Chayiv Misa. Haim Tamnu L'Gvoya Hashem of Karnu L'Misa. And what is the answer? Vayomer Hashem El Aram. The Eibusha said to Aaron, Ato uvanecho ve'esavicha itoch tisos avayin hamikdash ato uvanecha itoch tisos avayin kunaschem. You are responsible to protect the Jews. You are responsible. V'gam b'sachecha ma'ate levi shevet avicha hakar v'itoch v'lo b'lacha v'sharsucha v'ato uvanecha itoch lifnei or lo ha'edus. You are responsible, and Shevet Levi will be with you in front of the oil ha'edus. V'shamru mishmartecho mishmeres kol ha'oil achel kli ha'kodesh v'mizbech le'ikrova v'le'imusa gam hem gamata. V'nilvo lecha. V'shamru is mishmeres oil v'ed l'chol ha'vedus oil v'zar le'ikrova lecha. V'shmartem is mishmeres ha'kodesh v'mishmeres v'mizbech v'lo ye'oid ketzef al b'nei Yisrael. 5 psukim. When the Eibishter replies, the Yidden are saying Shem of Karnula Missa, that we might, Yid might push himself in accidentally, he'll get pushy and he'll fall into the oil moyed. In the Chotzer, you're allowed to be a Chatzar al Moed. And what's there in between the Chatzar al Moed and the oil moed and stuff? A curtain. And maybe he'll fall in and he's Chayiv Missa, Shem of Karnula Missa. The Eibishter said, no, the Kohanim are responsible to guard, and the Levim will help them guard. And that's the mitzvah Ladoidas that the Kohanim and Levim have to guard. So that's the reason. To protect the Yidden. What are you telling me? It's covered the Mikdash? Who told it Rambam? Who told us the Sifrei? I haven't, I have to look more, but I didn't see the Vaila Teretz about this. But I think that the Kasha is simple and the Teretz is simple. The Kasha is simple. First of all, even in Pshat, the Rambam obviously had a problem here. Why don't we have even one, out of the 24 Shomer, there's not one Shomer guarding. There was a line in the Azora from where a Jew is not allowed to pass. He was allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. From that beyond a certain line, he was not allowed to pass. And then obviously, if he passed, it was a mitzvah. He was Oven Aveda, and if he passed even further and he went into the Eichel, it was Chayiv Misa, right? And these 2 points, from when he's allowed to pass, not allowed to pass, or for when he's not allowed to pass, to where there's Chayiv Misa, there was never any guards b'chol. The 24 places that we learned last Monday, that the Kohanim and the Levim Hashomerim says the 5 gates of the Harabayis, the 5 pinas b'fnim, the 4 pinas b'fnim, 4 pinas outside the Azora, 5 of the 7 gates of the Azora. So that's, if it's to protect the Eden not to go into the wrong place, they shouldn't get an oive alav or it shouldn't have chiv misa. Why is it they're not by the door of the heichel? And why are they b'chlal by the harabayis? What's to do with the harabayis? So the harabayis you can answer b'doichik because the tumah yotzel al migufa. You have to remind the yidis to go to the mikveh, even though that's a mashra and psukim. So I think the answer is like,
if you have a shemer in the beginning, nobody could pass them to go to the next one.
yeah, but they are passing. They are going. They're allowed to go in. They're allowed to go into the harabayis. Unless Tuma Yotzel al Gufi, you're allowed to go into the harabayis. But once you go into the harabayis, you're allowed to go into the azara. And once you go into azara, there's a certain point where you're not allowed to pass. There was no guards there. And then there's a door that leads you from the azara to the heichel. And there was no guard there. And if you go over that threshold, you chayim misa. There's no guard there.
There were the Kohanim.
I hear the Memela, the Kohanim are walking around. By night, the gates are locked. And by day, the Kohanim are walking around. So they'll tell them, hey, go out, you're not allowed to be here. Similar to what we learned yesterday from the Rebbe, that the word is the Hes Chadas. And by day, it's I hear what you're saying. But anyway, the Nakuda, the Kasha, it remains. And the Poshtiv Shat in Psukim is that the guards are here in order to make sure that the Eden are protected. The Rambam says the guards are here in order for Kavod HaMikdash. It sounds like it's nothing to do with protecting the Eden and nothing to do if an oral or tome or manuval goes in. I understand what in the Bukhmi rationalizes it to understand Api Pshat, but Api Alocha, Api Pshuta Shamikra Lachoyra, I'm asking. So my answer is, I think, Adava Poshut. This mitzvah is already mentioned in Pashas Bamidbar 3 times in 3 different places. Hafla v'afela, 3 times in 3 different places. And I sent out the copies if you're looking at the Kesidra. First is in the Bamidbar, right in the beginning of the Bamidbar, where it says, when they were counting the Eden, Achas Mate Levi Loi Tifkid, Va'ata Hafkid, which is Posek Aleph Posek Nun. Va'ata Hafkid Salavim al Mishkan Eidus V'Kol Kelev al Kol Shaloi Hema Yisai Mishkan V'Hema Yisharitzu V'Samim Mishkan Yachnu and V'Alavim Yachnu Saviv la Mishkan Eidus V'Shamru Alavim Es Misheres Mishkan Eidus. That's number 1. So that's Aleph Nun and Aleph Nun Beis Nun Gimel Nun Dalet. These psukim, a whole cluster of psukim. Second place is in Gimel, Pasuk, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud. It says, V'Daber Shema Moshe Lemer, Hakne, V'Smate, Levi, V'Mante, V'Fnei Aaron, HaKoyin, V'Sheiru, So'osek. V'Shamrus Mishmarte, V'Smishmeres, Kol Eide, L'Fnei Oila, Moed, Lavid, Avodas HaMishkan. V'Shamrus, Kol Klei Oil, Moed, V'Smishmeres, B'nei Yisrael, Lavid, Es, Avodas HaMishkan. V'Nasata, Levim, La'aron, L'Avonim, N'Sunim, Hem, Elei, Meis, B'nei Yisrael. This Aaron was one of Tifkid, V'Shamris Kunasam. So, and Rashi says, V'Sheiris Su'oiseh, what does it mean? Ma'o Sheiris, V'Shamris Mishmartoi. Lefisha Shmiris HaMikdash Alav, Shalo Yikrazor, K'moshenem, as it says later by Koidech, Atu V'necha V'neisa V'yichtzayitoch, Titus Avoin, HaMikdash, V'Alavim, Alol Masayim, V'Zueh Sheiris. So it's the second. The third place is in Gimel, at the end. And is in Pasuk Lamed Ches, it says, "V'achayim lifnei Mishkan Kedma, lifnei Oil Moed Mizracha Moshe v'Aaron Avonav Shemri Mishmeres HaMikdash L'Mishmeres B'nei Yisrael," which is the pasuk that the Gemara brings in the first daf in Talmud. So 3 times already in Bamidbar, they were told this mitzvah that the Leviim and the Kohanim have to guard the Beis HaMikdash. This was much before the story of Korach. As Chazal say, the whole story of Korach was Oila Rosh, Oila Shchene. They already had the Golem. So this command was already there. Before the Yidden complained that Yidden Tamna and the Gvoya, it has to be that there was a different reason for it. And just like in general, the Golem was an Indian of Kovid, that they all were in a beautiful camping. They camped around the Mishkan, and Kovid the way that the Mishkan was the focal point. There was the Mishkan, then there was a Chotzet around, then there was the Levim, then there was a huge space, and then there was the 4 camps of the Yidden, 3 tribes on each side. 3, 3, 3, and 3. So this was all an Indian of Kovid. This is all an Indian of Kovid. It's just that later in Pashas Koidach, the Yidden complained, Ha'im tamnu ligvoya. So the Eibishter clarified. I want to go back and tell you that those 3 times of Pashas Bamidbar that I told you about the guarding, you shouldn't just think that it's Indian of Kovid. While you're standing guard for Kovid of the Mishkan, you should also make sure that the Yidden should be protected and they shouldn't enter. That was a side benefit to the mitzvah. The mitzvah was already said before, and that was the Kovid of the Beis HaMikdash. Elamai, when the Yidden later in Parshas Kodesh complained, the Eibishter said, I already gave you a mitzvah, and that mitzvah is to guard the Beis HaMikdash. And the Eibishter also clarifies. In the beginning, it wasn't so clear that it was that Aaron was also guarding. It sounds like Aaron is in charge. The Levim are doing the dirty work. So the Eibishter says no, and that's why Rashi there says, "What's the shidus?" The Rashi says, "Look later in Parshas Koirach." Why does he have to say look later? Because over here it's not so clear that it's Aaron's obligation. Maybe you would think Aaron is just the nachalnik, and there he sits and he's on his walkie-talkie. He tells them what to do. So he said, "No. The Eibishter makes it clear in Parshas Koirach later. Vayomer Hashem el Aaron." With the finger, he said, Ata, uvanecha, uveisavicha. You're responsible. You're going to get the schmitz. You're going to get it over your head. It's your responsibility. They're going to help you. And Takarashi says that it's not only that was standing guard. They also were mazir b'nei Yisrael, not to touch the kli, not to touch the Aron, the shulchan, the kli hakodesh. There was many more details in this mitzvah that perhaps are not a mitzvah l'doidus, because l'doidus, there's walls. They would take down the walls, and then the Aron was standing in the shulchan, so they have to warn the Yidden not to touch it. They were teaching the Yidden. It wasn't only the standing guard. They were also being mazir and teaching the Yidden what they're allowed to do and what not allowed to do. And that's not a mitzvah tznoig l'doidus. So therefore, the Rambam understood that this mitzvah is not a mitzvah in order to protect the Yidden, because this mitzvah was said much before. This mitzvah was said as part of the mitzvah of the golem, which is to protect and to give, not to protect the Yidden, to give kavod to the Mishkan. What's kavod for the Mishkan? The Mishkan is a focal point. Around that is a huge chatzar elamayit. Then there's the campment of the Levim and the Kohanim. Then there's a huge open space, and then there's the 12 tribes all around. It says even Bilam, he saw that the Sheikhim for the Shvatim, and he was awe-inspired when he saw the golem. Wow. And the focal point, if you look from a high mountain, you would see that there was like this circle of all the tents, a big space. Then there was a Kohen Levim, then there was a gate, there was a big courtyard, and then in the middle there was the Mishkan. The focal point was the Mishkan. The focal point was the Mishkan. Wow. Even the Soini Yisrael, Bilam was inspired when he saw this. That was covered. This is all covered for the Mishkan. It's just that later Parshas Koirach didn't complain to him time to Ligvoya, so they said, don't worry. They're guards anyway, so part of their jobs of being guards is not just to stand like in Buckingham Palace, like the Yukul, with the big fur hat, and the Violet, the Ganav is scaling up the walls and going into the Queen's bedroom. His job is to stand here and to march. And he's here and he's marching. So the Eibishter said, no, you're not like the guards in Buckingham Palace. If you see that the Yid is coming and he's not allowed to pass this line, tell him. Tell him he's not allowed to. You have to be mazir and teach the Yidden. But that's not the whole nekuda of the mitzvah. That's not all the whole nekuda of the mitzvah. Okay, so I think that's the nekuda in the Rambam. And just to add to this, the Rebbe says that the ikar is the hesach hadas. We shouldn't be masiach das. So according to the Rebbe's chidush, is gewaldig geschmack. What makes Aaron more ikar? Aaron was the ikar guard, and the Levim were the tafel. There were 21 Levim and 3 kohanim. What makes the kohanim more ikar and they're more tafel? Mitvas is add the ikar and add the tafel. But according to the Rebbe, that the main thing is shouldn't be hesach hadas, and the avoid of the kohanim by day takes over the hesach hadas. So that's the ikar, because the kohanim, first of all, the kohanim are 24. Because they do the avodah. The hours in the day, the avodah is only on the kohanim, not on the levim. And also, it's a deeper thing, because avoid is the Iker of not having as chadas. So midem is the kohanim are the Iker and the Levim are the Tofel. As I said, Shabbos, the Rebbe in this Sikha Tov Shalom Beis in the Ahadir and Mesachas Midas, he said in Yutra Tov Shalom Beis, the Rebbe said, I'm not getting involved in this machloikis between a Moshe Meshel and the Minkat Sheruv. I just think that the Minkat Sheruv was like a little bit, he went over the top. Easily you could fa'em for ala kashis. But the Rebbe didn't say anymore. This is just a comment that Rebbe made. I was thinking tonight to go through a little bit the Mincha Saluza and the Oilus Tomen to shlog up the Mincha Saluza, because the Rebbe said that it's easy to shlog up. So obviously we got to do it. The Rebbe said that it's easy to do, so it means that we could do it. It's just that I didn't get. I'm out of time now, and I'm really graciously gave me another 15 minutes here, but we'll leave it maybe for tomorrow night. But I just want to leave it with an akuda. Again, according to the Rebbe's Maskon and the Sikha, the whole idea of guarding the Beis HaMikdash is not to be Masiyach Das. Not to be Masiyach Das. And therefore, even children were allowed to do it. Even children was allowed to do it. One of the big tainas of the Avni Neza was that this is an avoida. And avoida has to be done with Bigdei Kahuna. And today we don't have Bigdei Kahuna. Well, obviously, it's very hard to imagine that little children were wearing Bigdei Kahuna and that any avoida the Beis HaMikdash were given to children. It sounds like in the Rebbe's Maskana that it's not an avoid in the Beis HaMikdash, it's a mitzvah in the Beis HaMikdash. And a mitzvah shaykh even b'zman hazeh. But that's a mashma. We don't know what the Rebbe really thinking. Years went by, and it was a summer Shabbos in Tov Shinun, a very short Fabrengen. At that time, there was some Fabrengens were mamish very short. I remember we come home, we still have a Suda. It was like, wow. Couldn't believe it. It was a very short Fabrengen, Shmini Tov Shinun. And the Rebbe, the whole Fabrengen was one akud. The Rebbe asked, how come today we don't have guards around the Temple Mount? How come we don't do the mitzvah, Shemiras HaMikdash? And how come for 2,000 years no one did anything about it? And the Rebbe said that the reason is because it was Pasha Pikuach Nefesh. Could you imagine after the Romans destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, you're going to have 24 men standing around the mountain. What do you think the Romans are going to do? Huh? Kill them.
Slaughter them.
Right. And what do you think the Ottomans would do? What did the Arabs in Yerushalayim 100 years ago? How about the Arabs today in Yerushalayim?
Something.
Rahman al-Islam. We don't have a government that's so strongly committed to protection of Jews. Baruch Hashem, much better than we had before. Chas v'shalom to compare. Baruch Hashem, today it's in Jewish control, but we're far from where we need to be. We're a long way. Chaz de Hashem, Chaz Hashem ki lo samanu. But it's pekuach nefesh. It was all these generations. It was pamish. It was pekuach nefesh. It wasn't even shaykh to do it. Pekuach nefesh means, but you get it done. You can't even do it if the mitzvah is to stand guard. If they kill the guards, you're not there anymore. You're not guarding anymore. So the Rebbe says, so therefore, Be'emes, the mitzvah is still b'zman hazeh. The Rebbe said, how do you do it b'zman hazeh? That every person guards their own Beis HaMikdash. My house, I make a Beis HaMikdash. My house is a Beis Chabad. My bedroom is for little children, is a Beis Cheder Tzivus Hashem, with a pushka screwed into the wall and a Chumash Tilam Tanya. And especially now, everyone that has in their house a Makom Kavua, where we have the Sfonim, when we daven, Kaveh Makom L'Tfilas in his house. Especially now, because the Chazal say, Ein Oinim L'Spal El Metoich COVID Rosh. When there's COVID, then you have to Oimid L'Spal, like a Chabadnik, with Lanach Siddis, a Machnachona. Yeah, the truth is we want to be Beireach Mina COVID. We all want to be Beireach Mina. There's Yidden that are Beireach Mina COVID. We always want to be Beireach Mina COVID. But the way to be Beireach Mina COVID is be Mispalel B'Kovid Rosh. So therefore, the Rebbe says that what's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is to guard. To guard. That this is precious to us. That the few minutes, we work for 8 hours in the day or 6 hours in the day, and we pay bills and we make phone calls and we do a lot of important things in the day. We have a whole to-do list on our phone and we have a whole schedule. But the hour at night that we're learning together on Zoom, Beis Menachem Mendel, this is what we guard. This is precious to us. You guard what's precious. When it's precious, you guard it. If it's mehechetesi, then you don't guard it. But if it's important to you, you guard it. You put it in a safe deposit box. You guard it. So there has to be that in our own mikdash miyat, in our house, that the time that is dedicated for Limudat Torah and the space that we dedicate for davening mitach koved rosh and the tzedakah pushke, the sefer Torah, the chumash, the tehillim, the tanya, the shir, and the time that we set to learn, that is precious and we guard it. And with this, we're doing the mitzvah of guarding the Beis HaMikdash. The Eibishter will help that in the schus of doing this mitzvah that we should come to do the mitzvah of guarding the Beis HaMikdash. So if we should summarize tonight's shir, so we went two things. One is the time of the Avnei Nezer. That true Moira Mikdash is Shaykh B'zman Hazeh, but Kovev Mikdash not. So as we said, the Smag learns it as one mitzvah, so you could learn one from the other. The second thing is, he said that there is it's the Kovev. What's the Kovev? That the Ganovim shouldn't steal Kalim, or that the Ganovim shouldn't go in, and the Oral Tomei Akin shouldn't go in. If it's a shouldn't steal Kalim, there's no Kalim to steal. If it's the Oral Tomei not to take, and not to go in and make it Tomei, that's Shaykh also B'zman Hazeh. So I'm saying both these things are not right. It's Kovet Gereida. It's for Kovet. It's a Baltevin Shesh El Shomer. It's Kovet, and that's Shaykh also B'zman Hazeh, and that is Befeida Shaykh also B'zman Hazeh. And this third time, which we didn't get to tonight, is Befrotus, was that this is an avoida. You need big day kohuna. So the truth is that many Mefarshim say that little children were guarding, and avoid. It's hard to imagine that avoid the Beis HaMikdash were done through little children. Ashtus, it's a mitzvah, not an avoida. And as I said, that the Rebbe said that even though the Moshe Meshel, that the Minchas Eluzah came out against him and wrote a whole Sefer Alos Tamim, the Rebbe says it's easy to pulverize it. So we didn't do it yet, but we did for the Kashis of the Avnei Nezer against him, and maybe tomorrow or another shir we'll go through. By the way, the Minchas Eluzah is very geschmack to read. And in general, he's a very readable. He has a Lashoni Eight Sefer. He has a language that's very, very readable. He's a very gifted writer. So Mitzvah Shem will b'tzachnemen to the Minchas Eluzah and Nochamo. As I said, in Tov Shinun, the Rebbe said, there's a mitzvah also b'zman hazeh. And why they didn't do it? Balabatish is what the Rebbe said. They couldn't do it for 2,000 years. It was pikuach nefesh. But the mitzvah is really here, and we have to do it. And as I said yesterday, that by learning about it, we're really doing it, because we're not being Masiach Das. That's one lesson. Another lesson is from the Sikha Tov Shinun, which is to guard our little Beis HaMikdash Me'at. The emphasis is that there is all kinds of tomei. There's a tomei and a oral and a akum. There's kol tzarua v'chol zav v'chol tomei lenefesh that are trying to go in. And you know how they're going in? They used to try to break down your door to get in. Today, they slip straight under the thing, like under the door, and through the mailbox. You know how they slip in? Rabbi Sai. Kol tzarua v'chol tomei v'chol zav, kol tzarua, kol zav v'chol tomei lenefesh. They slip in like this. You see this? This is how they slip in. This is how they slip in, Rabbi Sai. So we have to guard our Beis HaMikdash.
Have that. You shouldn't have that. If that's how they slip in, you shouldn't have that.
Oh, you're getting smart already. That is the point. Yes, that is the point. I would say that the chelik of mitzvah Shmiras HaMikdash today is to make sure that the tzarua, tameh, vazav don't enter. And you should know that tameh meis only has to be meshulach from one machin. Tameh sheyotzam guf two machinas. Tzarua has to go. The mitzvah has to go even for Yerushalayim. You can't go in. He can't go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Our jacket pocket is our Kodesh HaKadoshim. This is us. This is our Kodesh HaKadoshim in our Mikdash. How can we allow Kol Tzarua, V'chol Tzov, V'chol Tomei L'Nefesh, Yede Shegitz, Yede Mishagas, was Krichtem of the cup, and Yede Lutzonis, and Yede Mishagas. There's a Kricht Emetznaf on cup right away. He has to go in here. Rabbi say, this is the mitzvah of Shmiras HaMikdash today. The mitzvah of Shmiras HaMikdash today is to not allow the Tzarua, V'tomei, V'zov to get in through here. Eber shall helfen that in the schools of our Shmiras HaMikdash, our own Mikdash Miyat, that we keep it pure, that the Eibishter will help them, that very soon we'll do the mitzvah, the Pashtus, Agola Didan, that the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, before we know it, will be in Yerushalayim Eir HaKodesh, and we will see the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi rebuilt on the Har HaBayis, and it's like gleich nemen to the mitzvah of Shmiras HaMikdash.
Amen.
The person who mentioned the IDF.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the IDF, you have Druzim, you have Russian, the became, and these people are watching the Beis HaMikdash.
Right.
The Rebbe said that there is Nagea B'zman Hazeh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rabbi, כולנו טמאי מתים today. Today everybody is טמא מת.
Right.
So of course we cannot go to Beit HaMikdash.
Right. But we're talking about guarding it in the outside.
Unfortunately,
Outside
there's
the
a lot of
Har HaBayis.
Rabbonim in Eretz Israel allowed to people to go, a lot of Rabbonim.
Right. We'll
It's
talk
a
about
disaster.
this.
It's a
Since
disaster.
so many people brought it up, I think we'll talk about it Sunday morning. Lamaisa.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Hatzlocha.